Oh, I'll take it.
Welcome, everybody, to the August 16th meeting of the High Point City Council. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Britt Moore. We'll call the meeting to order. First of all, since we are streaming, I will have a roll call. And we'll begin with Councilman Holmes.
Here.
Councilman Johnson.
Here.
Councilwoman Peters.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore is here. Councilman Williams.
Here.
Councilman Hudson.
Here.
Councilman Jones.
Here.
We have been notified that Councilman Jefferson and Mayor Wagner will not be with us tonight, but we do have a quorum, so we will begin. First of all, before we start, if everyone would rise for a moment of silence and the pledge of allegiance to the flag. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First order of business is item 2021-357. This is a proclamation that I will read concerning the National Health Center Week. And let her speak first before I read it, or read it and then allow her to speak?
I would read it into the record first.
Okay, well, I'm going to read this into the record. The proclamation reads, whereas for over 50 years, community health centers have provided high-quality, affordable, comprehensive, primary, and preventative health care in our nation's underserved communities, delivering value to and having a significant impact on America's health care system. And whereas the country's largest primary care network, community health centers are the health care home for 30 million Americans in over 14,000 communities across the nation. 1 in every 12 people in the United States gets their care in a community health center. And whereas community health centers are a critical element of the health system, serving both rural and urban communities and often providing the only accessible and dependable source of primary care in their communities, nationwide, community health centers serve 1 in every 5 residents of rural areas. And whereas community health centers serve as a beacon of essential resources and support and testing and treatment in the face of the global coronavirus pandemic, and will continue to offer reliable, affordable, high-quality care against COVID-19 for America's most vulnerable and underserved communities. And whereas every day community health centers develop new approaches to integrating a wide range of services beyond primary care, including oral health, vision, behavioral health, and pharmacy services to meet the needs and challenges of their communities. And whereas community health centers are governed by patient majority boards, ensuring that the patients of each health center are engaged in their own health care decisions. And whereas community health centers are locally owned and operated small businesses that serve as critical economic engines helping to power local economies by generating $63.4 billion in economic activity in some of the country's most economically deprived communities. And whereas community health centers nationally employ more than 253,000 people, including physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and certified nurse midwives who work as part of multidisciplinary clinical teams designed to treat the whole patient. And whereas the community health center model continues to prove an effective means of overcoming barriers to healthcare access, including geography, income, and insurance status, improving healthcare outcomes, and reducing healthcare system costs. And whereas community health centers reduce overall cost of care by helping manage patients' chronic conditions, which keeps them out of costlier healthcare settings like hospital emergency rooms. And whereas community health centers are on the front lines of emerging healthcare crises, or crises, I guess, pardon, providing access to care for our nation's veterans, addressing the opioid epidemic, and responding to public health threats in the wake of natural disasters. And whereas National Health Center Week offers the opportunity to celebrate America's over 1,400 health center organizations with over 12,000 service delivery sites, their dedicated staff, board members, patients, and all those responsible for their continued success and growth since the first health centers opened their doors more than 50 years ago. And whereas during National Health Center Week, we celebrate the legacy of America's community health centers and their vital role in shaping the past, present, and future of America's healthcare system. Now, therefore, I, Jay Wagner, Mayor of the City of High Point, do hereby proclaim August 8th through 14th of 2021 as National Health Center Week. I encourage all Americans to take part by visiting their local health center and celebrating the important partnership between America's community health centers and the communities they serve. In witness and signed, Mayor Jay Wagner. And I would like to recognize, I don't have the name up here, maybe I do, Mrs. Kristen Moore, sorry, from Triad Adult and Pediatric Medicine to speak to this issue.
As you said, Community Health Center Week was August 8th through the 14th last week, and we were able to vaccinate a lot of our homeless population, uninsured and underinsured population with a community vaccination clinic that was free, no registration. It was the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, so it was a one-stop appointment that they could come in, get their shot real quick and leave. We were able to vaccinate a lot of people, and the Community Health Center Week was awesome. You know, we did a lot of things virtually, unfortunately, this year again, but it was great, and we were able to engage and interact with a lot of our community members, and I just thank you for the proclamation. We really appreciate it. And my name's Kristen Moore. I'm the marketing specialist at TAPM, accepting this on behalf of our CEO who could not be here tonight.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Thank you. I think I'm going to come around and present the proclamation. I would like to thank Mayor Wagner for, I think, allowing me to read the longest proclamation we've had.
I'm not moving. Step to your right, Rick, step to your right.
Get out a picture. Yeah, the proclamation.
I will be handling the next section, which is the Finance Committee agenda items. We met our regularly scheduled time. Council, if you look in front of you, we do have a few separate issues, but the first one is the consent agenda that contains all, starting with 2021, items 350, 351, 353, 354, 355, 359, 360, 361, and 362, which are obviously in your packets. I will make a motion that these items in the consent agenda be approved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second by Councilman Hudson. I'll call the roll. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
And myself, Councilman Moore's an aye. That motion passes unanimous. The next item under our regular finance agenda is item 2021-352. This item comes to us concerning our primary banking service provider and the request from staff. And Bobby Fitzjohn will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. General Statutes 15931 directs the governing board to authorize the official depository of the city. As a matter of practice, the finance department takes this service out to bid every 5 years just to see what's in the market, see what might be available, and to check our prices against what others are able to offer. The process is detailed in the attached memo, but essentially we sent an RFP out to every bank with a presence in the city. The 7 listed in the memo responded. A first round of evaluations was done based on the proposals, and the committee that evaluated was based on finance and customer service department staff. The top 2 evaluated proposals were invited to come in for a demonstration in which customer service, finance, and users participated and got to ask questions and got to see, their processes and what they could offer the city. Upon evaluation of that stage, Bank of America was who is our current banking services provider, was the clear choice. Staff was more comfortable with their offerings, and there were several items with the other bank that we would have had to go to third-party vendors for some services. We have to change up quite a few of our processes internally, and it would be more work, most certainly for the customer service department staff. So the Finance Committee is recommending awarding the Bank of America to be the next primary services provider for the city of High Point. I will say, Pinnacle has been a really good partner to the city. We've issued debt with Pinnacle over the past year. We just felt that Bank of America was the better choice for our banking service provider. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions for Bobby on this item?
Just in general, and I don't know if you said there was another banking entity. Can you even say their name since they're not?
Absolutely, it's in the memo. So Pinnacle Bank was the other top 2 bank that was evaluated and asked to come in for demonstrations.
Okay.
And they offered their best solution, and staff evaluated and felt that Bank of America provided a better option for what we do.
And you spoke to that we would have to maybe pull in a third-party entity to be able to process with Pinnacle. Would that be something that's worked out over time, or are we talking about something that just got to be like a permanent solution if we were to work with?
It sounded like we would have to change some of our payment, a better word, payment aggregator software. So we get about 12,000 basically payments that are coming to the city, in a monthly period. Well, obviously we don't want 12,000 individual payments in our bank accounts. There are some services out there that we currently use, and we have a relationship with one on the customer service side, Paymentus, that's a big partner over there, and that was not compatible with Pinnacle, and they actually suggested that we move to one of their providers. So that was one instance where we would have had to essentially sever a relationship that we're happy with in order to account for this new system.
You're talking about if someone was paying their utility bill, that's like the website that you would go to pay?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're our electronic payment provider, and I think there were issues with the compatibility, and we were encouraged to utilize one of Pinnacle's partners instead, if we were to go that route. I will say I didn't really address this, but there are some enhancements that came from going out to bid. So Bank of America is going to credit a courier for the 5-year term of this agreement, where currently our park rangers are bringing deposits down from North Point, and that will no longer be the case. We actually will have a courier service doing that. And then no bank analysis fees for the next year. So overall, on the contract, Bank of America is still slightly more expensive than Pinnacle, but there wouldn't be any bank analysis fees for the first year of the agreement.
Bobby, in terms of implementation and integration and man hours, software purchases, things like that, how much would you say, if implemented with Pinnacle, we would actually get closer to what Bank of America's cost is if we went that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the cost difference closes significantly when you talk about implementation costs. So there's a historical figure of about $25,000 to $30,000. I can't stress, though, that the additional staff resources right now would be especially difficult, especially on the IT side, which we would need lots of help with, customer service, retooling, and especially with having to bring on these third-party vendors that we don't have to have a relationship with now. It's going to add more time to this process. And I believe we talked about in the Finance Committee, I don't think there would be a time that the timing would hurt necessarily on paying out vendors, but I do worry about, on our customer service staff, how long it would take to get caught up once we go to this implementation. I think there's going to be a pause. You're essentially going to be working in 2 different banks for a little while, and we didn't see anything that made us think it was worth going to that. I will point out we are not spending more money, with the new Bank of America agreement than we are currently. So we're not spending more. We are just not going with the lower cost option. We're not recommending the lower cost option.
Moving to Pinnacle, would you see any need for additional staff increases, additional hiring, full-time employees?
We didn't get to that point. I would imagine not. It would certainly make life more difficult for some staff, and I can't speak for customer service if the additional work would, bring on the need for an additional staff member. But I do think you would lose some functionality that we're prepared to move forward with immediately. One being our ACH payment process, just like how we're all paid via direct deposit. We're ready to roll out paying our vendors in that method as well. That would be delayed however long it takes to implement our new banking service provider, and then however long it takes to get to that point with them. So it would significantly slow down that project, which has been delayed while we've been, seeing what else is out there.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. So do we use any third-party vendors with Bank of America? And who would those be?
We use Paymentus, but we're not really using them because, sorry, Bob, but we use Paymentus, but it's not because because we're using Bank of America. That's who our electronic payment processor is, and the concern is that they would not be compatible for their function in Pinnacle. So we would have to.
That would be the one third party that we would
That
have
would be
to change?
one, and then there's another pay mode. Is that what it is? Where it's pay mode and bank draft.
Okay.
So those 2 applications that are currently working with Bank of America, Pinnacle essentially said you've got to go out and find another solution to do those same things that you're doing with Bank of America.
But those 2 things, do we pay extra than what is noted here for the numbers on Bank of America?
This would
Or
be
is
an
it
apples to
fitted?
apples comparison, so this would
Okay.
just be the bank analysis fees for Bank of America. This wouldn't include what we pay Paymentus in order to, collect. If there's a fee that Bank of America charges, it's included in here.
Okay. And do we have any idea of what the fees would be to do a third-party vendor for Pinnacle?
I don't know that we've explored that. I don't know, Bob.
So with Paymentus, we went through a competitive process. We used to be with a company called Official Payments. And so we put out an RFP. We were looking for somebody that had an interface already with Kayenta, our CIS software. There were two people, Invoice Cloud and Paymentus. And Paymentus, we selected Paymentus at the time. And it was a 6-month changeover. Utilized IT staff and my staff.
Excuse me, could you come to the mic, please? Thank you.
It's for our people on the audio,
Yes, for
I'm pretty sure.
So if you look at our electronic bill, and it's the website that you're correct, Mr. Williams, that you go to make your electronic payments, as far as from the city's website. And it's Paymentus, and it's a per transaction basis. We pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.50 for a credit card and somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 cents for an electronic check. So it's per transaction based. And we average somewhere around 5 million to 5.5 million in revenue every month. And then somewhere in the neighborhood of, 24,000, 25,000 transactions
Per month.
per month. And then the other two, Paymode is like a consolidator for people that do online banking separately. And so if you're doing banking your payments through Wells Fargo, BOA, Paymode consolidates all those online banking transactions into one file for us daily. So as we post them, so.
And you're saying that won't, excuse me for interrupting, but sometimes questions need to be hit during, so you're saying that will go away if you make the change to Pinnacle?
The process that Pinnacle outlined for us was a little more elaborate. It would be through another company, another consolidator that they use, and the process was not quite as clean as ours. It was going to involve, we were going to have to send them a file, an accounts receivable file that we don't send currently. So it was a little more elaborate, and it was a two-step process. It was where one person would create it and then another person would approve it. And
If it's more elaborate, once that is implemented and installed, it should work better.
it would work the same, it's just a little more complicated process. It requires an extra step. And the same with the bank draft, whereas the new process with BOA on both Paymode and on bank draft is there's an electronic component to it that was going to be a phone-based conversation with Pinnacle. So they were just more seamless processes,
Sure.
a little cleaner.
Well, I imagine-
And I don't think it would involve adding staff. I think it
But there
would be,
there would be a data collection point on our side, maybe some initial data, then sent over to the third party for aggregation, and then sent back here.
right,
Instead of now, it's just collected and then sent directly to us.
correct. So it's just a little more elaborate.
Yeah. Have we communicated with Pinnacle to tell them that this is something that we would prefer, or the type of service, and maybe they're a large enough bank, I'm sure they could figure this out for us.
So we posed this question to Pinnacle during the demonstration, and their solution was to go to this other vendor partner of theirs. This essentially, there were no additional benefits in going to Pinnacle. I want to make that clear. There was no improvement to the banking service going to Pinnacle over Bank of America. So there was no step in this where we were getting a better product at the end of the day compared to what we're getting now, or more user functionality. They have an excellent online system in Cash Pro that we're able to utilize without picking up the phone and calling somebody. And so, like Bob said, there's probably not additional staff, but additional hoops that we have to jump through to do something that we're currently doing.
So, okay, I'm sorry. Councilman Williams again, I forgot that we're supposed to be doing that. Remind me of how long was the process? Did you say 6 months to get what you have up and running? Are you projecting that that's what we're looking at if we had to go to the new one?
I would think so, because you have to test it, make sure it's right, and make sure we're sending the right information, they're sending the right information back. So when we went, and the fact is, part of the benefit of what we did was we picked somebody who was already integrated with Kayenta. And that was there were only 3 companies in the U.S. that I'm aware of. It was Kubra and Invoice Cloud and Paymentus. And that helped us process-wise. And it was, some of those limitations on our part, some of those limitations on their part when you're dealing with software. So it was a 6-month transition.
6 months. Quick question, I guess I'm gonna pose this to, our attorney. This agreement is for 5 years. Is there any wiggle room for change if we so choose to do so, or this is just lock in until 5 and then?
No, I think the term was actually determined by staff, so I'll.
Yeah,
I'll
the
back
5
up
years has
on
just
it.
been the typical offering, and, you know, it gives everybody stability. It lets staff know that they can move forward with new projects, and they won't have to start over at a new bank within that time period. But historically, it's been 5-year increments, and most of our contracts will bring you a 3-year contract and then the option to renew for 2. So it's pretty typical with those other
Well,
contracts.
I mean, my question really is like if it's something that we chose to make a change and it's problematic 2 years in, can we say, listen, this is not working out, thank you, we want to start a different process to go to someone? Is that an option or no?
I'll let the attorney, it depend on what contract we signed, what agreement we got into, and, I mean, I don't know why we couldn't. We can get out of most
There's
contracts.
no legal reason that we couldn't.
The big thing is if you do change and we go through the cost and then you have to go back, then, you know, you're doubling up on the cost of but that's, you know, part of the decision to switch.
Probably not a popular question, but I just was.
I probably have an
Curious
accountant
on-
listening right now that's sweating. as you're saying that.
Bobby, this is Councilman Holmes. The third party that you would have to bring on for Pinnacle, I'm assuming they would have to go through an RFP process as well? Or have you identified those companies that would maybe speed up if we did make the change, so we wouldn't have any lag time or lost efficiency?
If Pinnacle is saying we would have to go with a certain partner of theirs in order to do the process, that would be the partner we'd have to go with. There wouldn't necessarily be, it would either be we don't have the functionality or we go with their partner.
Okay.
But as Bob was saying, the real issue might be losing functionality on the Kayenta integration side.
Okay, so I have a
Yes.
question now. Let's see if I can remember how I worded it. On the 5-year contract, okay, so this is kind of my thoughts, is, you know, I like saving money, and I like supporting local, which I think we all do, and I think Pinnacle does a lot for our community locally, but it being in still kind of crazy times and staff shortage, I don't want to put a lot of extra work on staff, but to do this for 5 years, I just don't, because I'd really like to support local, but I hate to put extra staffing work, but that's kind of how I'm feeling.
You know, we can always go back to Bank of America, I guess, and see if they have any issues with a shorter term contract. That is just the standard. I mean, if you see how long other cities are doing their banking contracts, again, it provides stability for the bank as well as staff. So if it's a 3-year contract, how much work would we put into new initiatives and new technology for a client that might switch again? I think that would primarily be the concern with not going with a longer term contract, at least from my understanding.
So, and this is Councilman Moore, in the presentation that states that we have issued a competitive solicitation bid in 2004, and then we did a last proposal process in 2016. I'm assuming if we're doing it every 5 years, we did it several times in between that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. About every 5 years. I think there was one time where it had maybe been extended by a year because the staff wasn't ready or something may have occurred. I don't have the history on that, but every 5 years is the
Well,
the
I
term that's been
appreciate
approved.
that you do that, and I appreciate because based apparently on statutory situations, you're not necessarily required, but it does seem to be something that most municipalities do.
And it's something we would encourage with any service, is to take it out to bid every so often, see what you can get. If we hadn't done this and just renewed, we wouldn't see the courier credit, the improvement there, or the 1 year of free analysis fees.
Did Pinnacle offer a courier service?
Pinnacle has essentially agreed to the same thing, where they would agree to do the courier as well. So apples to apples, that's the same.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I may,
Yes, please.
I think it is our job to be as good as stewards with this High Point's money as possible. And we're talking about over a 5-year period, $250,000 difference.
Sorry, it's 50,000 total over the 5 years, so about
Is that-
10,000 a year.
Okay, that's not annually.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
10,000 a year is about the difference
Right.
that we're talking about. And yes, so sorry if I didn't
Oh,
explain
no,
that
no,
correctly.
I appreciate the
That's-
clarification, but
a big
either
difference.
way, if they were exact equals, based on what I've seen Pinnacle do in the community versus the presence or lack of presence I've seen by Bank of America, even if they were equal, I would be inclined to push staff to go with Pinnacle versus Bank of America to keep that business local. Being that it's not equal and that there is a significant difference, it would be my recommendation that we direct staff to do the business with Pinnacle versus Bank of America.
Any other comments or questions on this item?
Could I just say?
Sure, please.
I think if you all decide not to do Bank of America, it may be helpful for us to go out and see what the other banks could offer. So there's a number 3 and a number 4 who may be able to meet our needs before, unless that's what we're saying
Was that
tonight.
not part of the process before you got down to the final two?
It was part of it, but when you ask the banks to come in for a demonstration, you really get to see what they're capable of doing, and that's where the difference showed up, right? That's where you had the real separation between Bank of America and Pinnacle. And so I would just,
Were they the only two that came in based on your scoring prior
yes,
to
yes,
that?
yes, because they were the top 2 candidates, which is common in a RFP process to bring in your top 2 candidates
Right.
and do a demonstration.
But now, if we kind of decide to go the other way, we're going to reopen it back up to those that had already participated one time?
I would suggest having them come in to do the technical demonstration to see what they're capable of doing versus what we know we're going to have issues with on Pinnacle. Now,
But we know that any one of the others that come in didn't score high enough to make the final two.
right, but that is before any kind of presentation or demonstration was made. That is based on their proposals
Okay.
in the
But
beginning.
we also know that they're going to be a higher bid.
Higher cost? Potentially, I think Truist was a little lower than Bank of America, but yes, they would be a higher cost. So again, if that's, the decision is based on cost, then, you all
Well, no,
are,
I think it's been discussed that it's not only cost. Of course, I've always been one to kind of distinguish between price and cost, the way I think.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore, if I may.
Sure.
The City Manager, Tasha Logan Ford. One other piece of information that might be helpful is to have a better understanding of the ability for the new banking service provider to interact with our current systems and what it may cost us if we have to switch to another third-party product. Because I think that has to be part of the cost that you all are considering, is if it does not interact with our current systems like Kyenza or Paymentus, what is it going to take for us to be able to have those systems operational, and what functionalities we might be losing if we were to switch and go with another banking service provider versus Bank of America. So I think those are all part of the cost, and also what is that end result that our citizens will see if we were to switch service providers. And that may take us a little bit of time, but we just need to extend where we are till we can get that information together and bring that back.
Mr. Fitzjohn, after hearing the comments and questions to this point, do you have on your time schedule, in your departments and what you're doing, do you have a problem if I were to recommend that this be tabled until further information can be gathered? And does that still give you a window to get back to us? I think we come back when, and we're off Labor Day, so
It's the second meeting in September.
it'll be a second, third Monday in September.
we will, we'll certainly see what we can gather within the next couple of weeks and then brief you as the finance chairman on if we can bring something back that soon. Part of the reason of taking this out so early was so that if we did have any issues, we'd have time. If we were converting, we would have time. So I'm not necessarily concerned on that standpoint. It is our, end of year busy season, but obviously we're ready to
Well, we
reach out to
wanna
those
I know-
vendors.
I know you do, but obviously there's some questions or
Sure.
comments, not necessarily concerned so much by this council, but some philosophical things in this, I think. And so I would like to, does that need to be done through a motion?
Yes, sir, it
Okay.
does, if you
I would
would.
like to make a motion that this item, let me get my eyeballs on, 2021-352, be tabled until further information can be provided to council, hopefully the first meeting, which will be the third Monday of September, or possibly to the Finance Committee prior to that, the Thursday prior.
And can we confirm exactly what you all are looking for? Just because, obviously, we heard
Okay.
many different
Sure, you
concerns.
did, well, for me, and then I'll let them say, this Councilman Moore, for me, once we felt like there may be a change coming, you interjected that you would like to open it up to others coming back in, which I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but it triggers in my mind that there's possibly some other questions that are out there or left underserved. So if you want to, I don't know how quickly the one or two other potential suitors could be contacted and get you the information you wanted, in addition to the information Ms. Manager Tasha Ford has asked about. That would be helpful. But if those things could be accomplished, I feel like we would have a more comprehensive base with which to address some of the concerns that have been brought up.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Mine is really simple. I just want to make sure that if we were to move in a different direction, the transition will be as less negatively impactful to staff. I want to make sure, if you talk with Truist to whoever, that if it's something that we can operate when it comes to making a connection with a third party, that is not as impactful to negative impact to y'all.
Thank you. I want to hear what you and everyone else has to say, but there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, it's seconded by Councilman Williams. Don't have the, well, I guess I do have the checkoff sheet. That'll just change here. But Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman
Can I
Johnson?
speak first, please?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I thought I asked for that. Go
No.
ahead.
I apologize, we didn't have a second yet. I'm going to stick to my guns. I always say I'm going to do what staff recommends because you're an expert in finance and I'm not. So if you recommend me to do this, I'm going to recommend. I assume you've already done your homework. So I will not recommend tabling it simply because I always like to do what staff recommends. So that being said,
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Hudson. Is there any other comments before I presume with a vote? Okay, Councilman Johnson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
no.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. So that motion passes. This will be tabled. Thank you for your extra work, Mr. Fitzjohn. The next item under finance is a public hearing, item 2021-356. So I will open up the public hearing at this time to hear concerning the sale of city-owned property. Is there a presenter? Is Kim going to present? Ms. Kim Thor?
Yes, sir, she is.
Good evening. City Council approval is requested for the sale of property located at 521 West English Road, which is on the corner of Lindsay Street near the stadium. It will be for $275,000. The buyer would be the adjoining owner, Van Diesel Properties, LLC. They're at 515 West English Road. Their current business, North Carolina Splash Works, is a year-round showroom. The sale will allow for economic development by the company, who plans to invest up to $1 million for expansion of the business that will enhance the revitalization efforts in the multi-use stadium district.
Thank you, Ms. Thor. Are there any questions from council for staff? Is there anyone present who would like to comment on this matter? Then I will close the public hearing on this matter and make a motion that item 2021-356 be approved.
Second.
There's a second by Councilwoman Peters. Call the roll. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Now, that is all for finance. So at this time, we will move on to Prosperity and Livability Committee, and for that, I will recognize Councilmember Hudson, who's the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two items to bring before you tonight. One with our bulk item collection schedule and another a discussion of the Stormwater Improvement Program that we have in place. These are both through our Public Services Department, and Robbie Stone, I believe, will present both of these.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Council. So tonight I want to take a few minutes and talk to you about our bulk item collection with our Environmental Services Group. I am Robbie Stone, the Deputy Public Services Director. I'd like to introduce Greg Holt. He is actually in the back of the room with us tonight. I want to give Greg Holt a big hand. He has done an outstanding job and continues to do that with the resources that he has. And Greg has many years of experience in the solid waste industry. He has various certifications, and he has just done a great job with us, as I mentioned. So I mentioned we want to talk about the bulk item collection. Currently, we have weekly bulk item collection. And some of those things that we collect are sofas, chairs, mattresses, carpets, appliances, and various other items. Now, bulk item collection is not intended for whole house clean out, but oftentimes we do see large piles placed out there. So tonight I want to bring forth to you a proposal for our bulk item collection. We want to propose moving this to a bi-weekly collection. Some of our reasoning for this is we anticipate that we'll have fuel savings for this bi-weekly collection. We'll reduce our overtime cost. We'll have more consistent bulk collections, and we'll maximize on software usage for collection purposes. And also, a big point is it will be a relief for weary staff. So how do we save on fuel? We have 4 bulk routes that cover an estimated 1,261 miles a week. By alternating these collection weeks, that number will be cut in half. The biweekly collection will allow bulk operators viable time to address illegal dump sites that are often left to collect on non-scheduled work days, and I'm sure you all have seen that or maybe received calls about that. But we'll have the time to address those work sites, which will reduce additional driving and staffing needs and fuel costs. This will also reduce the monthly miles covered to around 2,500 miles, which will allow more time for maintenance without causing delays in conditions. So we'll be able to stay in that half of the city during that week and try to address all those sites. We anticipate that we'll have a reduction in overtime cost. As you can see by this chart here, the overtime costs have gradually increased quite rapidly over the past few years. We anticipate that this is going to also help us cut those costs as we transition to a biweekly collection. We anticipate more consistent collections. By providing biweekly collections, we would recommend that these collections be scheduled on the recycling day, so it's easier for the customer to remember when their bulk collection schedule is. One week will consist of 5 routes being collected, while the next week will consist of 4 routes. The debris left at the curb every other week. Debris will be left at the curb every other week as customers adapt to a revised bulk collection. And less debris at the curb is going to lead to a more aesthetically pleasing city. Route efficiency. The use of mobile technology will help us identify locations to service. We're currently testing various mobile technologies, but our plan there, our idea there is that these bulk item locations will be identified so that these bulk trucks do not have to travel up and down every street, so we can actually go straight to those locations and collect that. By providing bi-weekly collection, our drivers can go to a specific location that has been marked for bulk while reducing the amount of that travel time. As our data supports, our trucks are servicing around 891 locations per week. And that equates to about 223 per day or 22.3 locations per an hour. And then following these locations, we do anticipate improved efficiency and minimize the number of miles covered in a day and reduction in fuel costs and consumption. So why now? So it's actually probably closer to 19 to 20 weeks now, but we've been working overtime with the same few staff members. Prior to the meeting tonight, I had a city staff member come up to me and said, I just want to let you know that I've been in communication with Greg Holt and his staff, and they showed up Saturday in our neighborhood, and she said we all were outside clapping because they were out there collecting bulk. So these staff normally work Monday through Thursday, but for the past 18, 19, 20 weeks, they've been working Fridays and oftentimes on Saturdays as they did this week. The physical and mental toll on the operators for this ongoing work. Employees are weary and with the ongoing extended hours on these routes. And these bulk trucks are on routes at least 8 hours a day, probably more like 10 hours a day. And this does not allow the proper time for this equipment to be maintenance. It's recommended that these trucks have maintenance every 40 hours. And even though our fleet is doing a great job trying to help us, we're not able to turn in the trucks as frequently as we need to for this. Employees worked around 1,367 hours of overtime within a year, which equated to almost $43,000 during that time frame, which is higher than the salary for if we were to hire a new employee for this position. We have safety concerns too by continuing to move forward like we are. Solid waste industry is the 5th deadliest industry in the U.S. Many accidents and incidents increase with overworked staff. The fatality rate is 34 per 100,000, and a total of 37 industry-related deaths occurred, and the most common of those were in the transportation industry, so the collections of the waste. We've had a reduction in workforce, and not by a push from internally, but we've had a loss of equipment operators through attrition, through injuries and other variables, which have led to shutting down routes at times and keeping bulk constantly behind. I can personally tell you that Greg back there, one of the things he hates to do the worst is call me and say, Robbie, I've got to make that tough choice today. We've got to shut something down. And unfortunately, that oftentimes comes to bulk routes being shut down. So since last March, we've lost 8 equipment operators that were primary route drivers. Holidays, vacations, and sicknesses impact these collections, and there's need to preserve the weary staff. I will note that just today, we took a group out of another division and have moved 4 employees over to our environmental services group to train them on these bulk trucks so that we have some additional staff helping. Now what that's going to do, that's going to impact the operation of the other division, which is our streets department. We took these folks out of our mowing crews. So it's going to impact the mowing that we typically do around the city. So how do we, if we're given the authority to move forward with this, how do we go about this? How do we implement this change? Some recommendations are to send mailers with the monthly utility bills, to utilize various social media platforms, to share within our educational sessions that we hold within recycling, within our stormwater groups, to highlight on the city website of what to do, what we're doing here. I did have a question when we talked in P&L, what do we anticipate some of our savings would be from this? So we just looked at the trucks that are utilized in this group, and if the fuel cost for those trucks is cut in half, plus the maintenance cost, I said the maintenance cost, let's just assume that cost is cut by 25%, we're looking at over $40,000 a year savings just by transitioning to a bi-weekly bulk route collection. So with that, I put forth the recommendation to transition to a bi-weekly bulk collection. And at this time, I'll take any questions and try to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Any questions for staff?
I got one, but not really a question, because I appreciate the work that you put in, and y'all have been really responsive when we've had questions on why something was still out there. I think the biggest selling point is educating everybody so they'll make the change. But I got one maybe tip.
Yes, sir.
I see all the social media and the other items, but I remember when we were switching the trash cans from manual to the machine.
Yes, sir.
Y'all were putting stickers on people's trash cans?
Yes, sir.
Nothing worked faster than that.
I was about to say.
Maybe sticking that on the green recycler to remind people, when you put this out, put your bulk out, and not before.
Good idea.
Just an idea.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Robbie, I know in situations, sometimes people put bulk items out midweek or whatever, and I've called you on a few of them and requested isolated cases where they just mess up and forget the week or do something off. Will we still have that ability to the onesie twosies here and there so that we don't just end up having a couch sitting out there for a week and a half?
And I think that'll fall back into our educational sessions. We do not like leaving bulk sitting out. It is a magnet and attracts more bulk or people sifting through it. So what we want to do is work with that property owner and try to educate them. Now, if it's an ongoing issue, then we'll have to obviously take other steps. But yes, I think we would definitely try to address those as they do come about.
Okay.
Robbie, it's Councilman Holmes. The illegal bulk sites, do you have a plan to counteract those, signage or anything like that to maybe slow down the accumulation of bulk in illegal areas?
Yes, sir. So we have placed signage at several locations. Signage is not always effective. We do have cameras that we are in the process of utilizing. We just got those in over the past month, have been going through some training. It's a totally different camera system. So we are looking, hopefully over the next 2 to 3 months, hopefully we're going to see some benefits from those, and we can transition those to different locations throughout the city and hopefully be able to assist with some of the illegal dumps.
Very good. If there are no more questions, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve item 2021-363.
Second.
There is a motion and a second by Councilman Jones. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Stone and Mr.
For our
Stone.
next item, we'll move on to the Stormwater Improvement Program that they're asking for some, a suspension of.
Yes, sir. All right, thank you, Councilman. So we're going to talk about our Stormwater Division again, or this evening, looking at the Stormwater Improvement Program. So looking at our Stormwater Division, I've got a list of bullet points of various items that our Stormwater Division performs. And I want to focus for this presentation on bullet point number 4, but more specifically bullet point number 5. Our Stormwater Department primarily maintains the public stormwater systems. And then bullet point number 5, our Stormwater Improvement Program. Just between these two bullets, we have about 60 projects in the queue. And we just, about a week and a half ago, we've received another 6 additional projects for Stormwater Improvement Program, and we'll talk more detail about exactly what the Stormwater Improvement Program is. Before we get there, I want to give you a little bit of history on the stormwater. Back in the Clean Water Act of 1972 was created the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, the MPDES. The Water Quality Act of 1987 expanded the power of the MPDES to municipalities with separate storm sewer systems, MS4s, that needs permits in order to discharge into receiving waters. So we want to make sure that what is being discharged is not harming the waters that we have out there, not harming the aquatic life, not harming our drinking water supplies or someone downstream of those. In 1990, Phase 1 municipalities with populations of 100,000 or more had to obtain permits. In 92, the Stormwater Utility was established here in High Point. In 96, the Stormwater Division was established in High Point. And then in 2003, we obtained our MPDS Phase 2 permit. So Stormwater Division, I mentioned at the beginning here that there's 2 bullet points. So one of the main things we do is our work within the right-of-way, maintaining the stormwater system within the right-of-way. The picture to the left here, it is a picture of what used to be a ditch, and you can hopefully see about in the middle of the picture, you can see the top crest of a stormwater pipe. So over time, that ditch is filled up, and that pipe probably has filled up as well. So when we have rain events, if any of you experienced the rain that just occurred right before the meeting here, when that rain event happens, that ditch and that pipe's not functioning, or functioning a very small percentage of what it should be. So one of the things that our stormwater crews will go out and do is to clean that ditch out, clean that pipe out, may even have to replace the pipe if it's broken or failed due to other variables, so that when we do have these storm events, that it is functioning as designed. This slide here shows, it's a snapshot of a neighborhood, and if you see the magenta colored line kind of running in the middle of the street, that is our stormwater pipes. That is, if you can see the little white lines to the edge of it, those are the property lines or the right-of-way lines. So everything within that right-of-way, our Stormwater Division will maintain as it relates to stormwater. As soon as you cross outside of that right-of-way, that system, that stormwater system, is considered to be on private property. So that is not something that the city will automatically maintain unless there's an easement that specifically states this is for city maintenance. However, we have the Stormwater Improvement Program where a property owner can contact us, and if they have stormwater issues that qualify for the program, then we can enter into an agreement with them and make repairs on private property. So, moving on to the Stormwater Improvement Program, with that program, we can move on to, if an agreement is entered into, we can move on to private property and we can clean out debris and obstructions that are impeding water flow. We can perform bank stabilization if there's severe erosion. If there's cave-ins or sinkholes or pipes that have just totally failed, we can install pipe to help contain that flow and reestablish the pre-existing conditions there. So who qualifies for this program? All property owners in the city of High Point qualify that receive stormwater runoff from public streets or publicly owned land contributing to the flow of the pipe or the channel. Now, this program does not apply to new construction projects or to the maintenance of privately owned water quality devices or pipes that are greater than 42 inches in diameter. So who is financially responsible? This Stormwater Improvement Program for the private property owner, they're responsible for the material cost only. The city is responsible for any engineering and design costs. They're responsible for the labor and the equipment to perform this work. This slide here talks about our stormwater fee. So when we look at our residential properties, we look at the amount of impervious surface area, or ISA. And we have, in the bottom right corner of the slide, we talk about the average impervious surface area for a residential property in High Point was measured to be 2,588 square feet. So that, in turn, was translated into one ERU, or equivalent residential unit. So our stormwater fee is based off of the ERUs, and so one ERU, the rate for that is $4 per month. And I think, yes, so you'll see here the impervious areas. I just moved forward here. It shows the house, the rooftop, and the driveway. So that is the impervious area. Now, when we transition over to look at a commercial property, we actually measure the impervious area of a commercial property. For this example here, we measured approximately 100,000 square feet. And so that 100,000 square feet is divided by the one ERU, which again is the 2,588 square feet. When you go through the math, that transitions into $154.56 per month for their stormwater fee. Our Stormwater Improvement Program is a program we have been utilizing within the division, working on private property. I pulled four properties that we have utilized this on, and just looked at the cost that it cost the city to do this work. And then I got with our engineering department. I said, if we had to have bid this out, what would the cost estimate be for that? You can see we have a couple projects on here where the difference is approximately $10,000. We have a couple others where it's much less. So we can see here that it is a benefit to we do not disagree, it's a benefit to our customer base. And there is a cost difference if we do have to bid this out. So we're to a point now, though, where our current Stormwater Improvement Program, we have about an 18-month backlog. And that is it's very disheartening because when we do get a call from a customer, we'll go out and I have been going out and looking at the issue. And if they qualify, we state that they qualify, we give them the paperwork. Many times they fill out the paperwork, they write a check, and they send it in to us. And so here we are with all the documents signed, we have their money in hand, and even though we've already talked and given them an idea of how long a wait it's going to be, we have that in hand. Oftentimes, 2 or 3 months down the road, maybe 6 months, we have some extremely hard rain events. Maybe this customer's issue is severe erosion. The erosion gets worse. They call back and say, I need you to move me up on the list. And we're kind of to a point where our resources are just not there to move them up on the list. Our hands are somewhat tied. And they get angry, and I understand that. I would be upset too if I'd paid money for that. So our proposal here is to suspend the Stormwater Improvement Program for an indefinite time period. While it's in suspension, I want to rewrite this Stormwater Improvement policy. And then during that same time frame, even bigger than rewriting the policy, is let's focus on this backlog. Let's get these 60 projects that are in the queue. Let's address those. And let's figure out how we can better handle these and better address the needs of our customers in the future here. So that is our proposal, and I'll be happy to take any questions and try to answer any questions this time.
Robbie.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Any questions from?
Yes, it's Councilman Holmes. So your plan is to suspend the program, clear the backlog while you're revamping the program, and then reintroducing it to new customers at the end of the process of rewriting the program?
And we would bring this new policy, obviously, back to council before anything is reintroduced to customers. We want to make sure that everybody's in agreement and understands what we're proposing and make sure there's nothing that we're missing.
This is Councilman Moore. If you mentioned that possibly some of those in the queue have a substantial event that happens while they're in the queue and they call about, moving them up. I'm assuming at that point, do you let them know up front that because of the wait, there could be changes the cost estimate you have given them?
We do not, once we give them an estimate, we stick with that estimate. And that's another reasoning for suspending the program, because how much issue can change over time.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie, that would even stick with the estimate even if the recalculation causes a loss to the city?
Yes, sir. Okay. We are also, we have not moved into this step, but because of a lack of resources in other divisions, we have had to look across public services of where we can pull resources from to help. And we haven't done this yet, but one of the areas we're looking at is possibly pulling folks from Stormwater to help in other locations. And that's going to even put us further behind, and I don't want to do that, but that is something that's on the table just to keep operations moving within public services as well.
How, redirecting those resources, this is Councilman Holmes, how big of an impact would you see to other areas of performance for the city to redirect that, particularly stormwater?
So if we redirect to stormwater staff, we're going to create a further backlog and delay during responding to these needs that have already been placed within our queue. I can't, and I guess how much further, how much longer, without knowing how long those resources have to be completely reallocated, I can't answer that right now, but we could keep you updated if we did have to reallocate those resources.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. If there are no further questions from council, I will make a recommendation, Mr. Chair, to approve 2021-364.
Second, Holmes.
There is a motion seconded by Councilman Holmes. I'll call the vote. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
And Councilman Jones.
Aye.
That motion passes Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Nothing further from the committee, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Hudson. I think it's fair to say in our hour here, we've come across a common theme that it's a challenging time for lots of departments and lots of industries, and backlogs seem to be part of the norm, which is very unfortunate. Hopefully, we can work our way out of this soon. Fire my. Okay. Next item is planning and development, and I will try to work through that one for us. The first item under planning and development is 2021-365. This is a resolution of intent, so there is no need for a staff presentation. And this is just establishing a public hearing date of September 20th, 2021 to consider a request by Vitessa High Point Incorporated to abandon 60-foot wide unimproved right-of-way of the sewer along the northeast property line of 200 Southwest Point Avenue. But I do see, she must be getting ready for the next one. This unimproved right-of-way runs in general east-west direction between the Reading Drive Ennis Street rights-of-way and 925 Millis Street, Guilford County Tax Parcel 172337. Is there any discussion? Well, I'll make a motion that we recognize the resolution of intent.
Second.
Thank you.
There's a motion and a second by Councilwoman Peters. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote? Aye. Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams? Ooh, stepped away. Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
And Councilman Jones?
Aye.
All right, that motion passed. Okay. Next item are part of our several public hearing items tonight. The first item is 2021-366 Leo Terra Development Plan Amendment. I've been told that there are several presentations here that are going to come together. Heidi Galante has stepped to the podium, and she will explain the setup.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I am Heidi Galante with the Planning and Development Department, and I will be doing, along with Herb Shannon, a joint presentation of Plan Amendment 2102, Annexation Case 2103, and Zoning Map Amendment 2113. While we are doing this presentation up front, each item will need to be voted on separately at the end. Just to orient you on the map, the request is for a plan amendment for approximately 45 acres located on the northwest corner of Johnson Street and Skeet Club Road, from low-density residential, which allows up to 5 dwelling units per acre, to moderate-density residential, which allows between 5 and 8 dwelling units per acre. The area on the map shows the area which is requested with the dark dash outline, and the yellow on the map represents low-density residential, the green represents recreation and open space, and that beige up in the northwest represents rural residential. Land uses in the area to the north, there are undeveloped parcels and a single-family subdivision. To the east is a mix of rural residential, undeveloped parcels, and a horse farm. To the south, directly to the south, is Orchard Knob, single-family attached dwelling units. Across Skeet Club is a religious institution and major school. And to the west is Skeet Club Ridge subdivision that has single-family detached dwellings. Staff reviewed the applicant's request and noted that they are proposing single-family attached dwelling units limited to 7 dwelling units per acre, and the proposed moderate-density residential classification supports this type of use. This section of Johnson Street is surrounded by urban density, residential to the north, west, and south. Rural residential remains to the east in unincorporated Guilford County. Filling in this area with urban density residential allows for a consistent development pattern in this area of town. There is a need for a variety of housing types in our community. And while this is an increase in planned density, it is limited by zoning condition, and it is only 2 units per acre higher than the adjacent Orchard Knob zoning, which is zoned RM5 and is currently low-density residential on the land use plan. The plan amendment provides for an orderly growth of the city in a direction where water and sewer have been extended, roads are being improved, and nearby recreation facilities will support the development. A change to moderate density residential will meet a growing need in the community. Staff recommends approval of the request. The request meets the goals and objectives of the land use plan and will be in harmony with the land use pattern. The Planning and Zoning Commission met on July 27th and recommended approval of this amendment by a vote of 7-0. Do you have any questions of me before I turn it over to Herb to present the annexation and rezoning case?
I have a question. I was just wondering, so I know this area well, and I know that horse farm because my daughter used to ride there, but I was just curious, has planning considered any type of buffering along the east side of Johnson Street to kind of allow for some buffering for the horses, so to maintain their safety?
Herb will cover those in the zoning conditions,
Okay.
and there have been some conditions for buffering offered.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore, I wasn't sure whether I heard you open the public hearing on those matters.
It's possible I didn't, but I will be glad to do so.
Thank you.
That's why we have you here.
I'm glad I can contribute.
I think I did. I'm gonna just say I think I did.
Just want to make sure.
Okay, so
Thank you.
just to make, for the record, public hearing has been opened concerning items 2021-366, 2021-367, and 2021-368. Can I combine them that way?
Again, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Herb Shannon, Senior Planner with the City of High Point Planning Department, and I'll be providing you with a summary of the other 2 components of this request, the annexation and rezoning. The site that Heidi had provided information on is highlighted in this teal color. Just for those members of the public, the areas that are highlighted in white are lands that have already been annexed and are part of the City of High Point corporate limits. Those areas in gray are unincorporated Guilford County. The applicant is requesting annexation of this site to have access to city utilities to facilitate the development of a residential subdivision. This portion of the city's planning area along the Johnson Street corridor north of Ski Club Road our planning area extends up to I-40. And since the late 1990s, there have been numerous annexation approvals in this area totaling over 13,000 acres. The site does abut the city limits to the south and to the west. City services have been established in this area, and city vehicles currently travel along the Ski Club Road corridor and Johnson Street corridor, providing services to multiple residential subdivisions. As you can see, the site is mostly surrounded on 3 sides by existing lands within the city, and the annexation of this land into the city of High Point represents a logical progression of the city's annexation policy for this area and will not negatively impact the city's ability to provide services. Anytime land is annexed into the city, city zoning must be established. So the final part of our presentation is for zoning map amendment case 20-13. The applicant has submitted a zoning application to establish city zoning for this property. Currently, this land has an agricultural zoning designation under Guilford County's jurisdiction. The proposed rezoning is to establish a conditional zoning residential multifamily 16 district on this site. In conjunction with that application, the applicant has submitted a conditional zoning ordinance in which they've offered conditions pertaining to what uses would be permitted, development density, landscaping, right-of-way dedication, vehicle access, and road improvements. The applicant does desire to develop a single-family attached or townhome development on this property. Adopted guidance policy, which consisting of the land use plan and other zoning approvals, have supported this residential use types in this area within a half-mile of the intersection of Skeet Club Road and Johnson Street. You do have a situation where you have some alternate residential development in this area. To the north, you have the Meadow Creek development. That is a single-family subdivision, and to the west, you have the Skeet Club Gardens subdivision. The Meadow Creek development was annexed and obtained zoning approval and a special use approval in 1990 to allow a cluster development. Cluster development was a provision under the prior zoning ordinance, which is no longer permitted, but it allowed smaller lot sizes if more open space was provided. So, and the same approval was also requested and granted for the lands to the west in the early 1990s. In 1992, the budding subdivision requests rezoning and special use for cluster development that allowed smaller lot sizes. More homes were able to be developed in that area in exchange for allowing a larger open space area. Directed to the south is Orchard Knob Townhome Development, which received annexation and zoning approval in 1999 for a townhome development. And also south of that, at the entrance to this abutting subdivision, you have the St. Andrews Townhome Development, which obtained zoning approval in 2000, both to support the RM5 district, the residential multifamily 5 district, to allow townhome developments up to 5 units per acre. That's just a little summary of the zoning pattern in this area. Included in your staff report is information on school impact. That is not required, but a lot of times those are questions that come up. Staff contacts the Guilford County Facility Management Department, note to them what is being proposed and the maximum density. A lot of times the numbers that they provide is a lot higher because they're looking at worst case scenario. But as a courtesy, we include that in the staff report in case there are any questions from the public as to the impact on schools, and that comes directly from Guilford County Schools. Also included is a transportation table. This project did require a traffic impact analysis. The transportation table notes that impact, and also a copy of the executive summary from that executive summary of that TIA is included in the package for the council and the public to evaluate. I would note with this, that any zoning approval that is a conditional use, the council should consider the issues outlined in the staff report. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of the key items from that staff analysis. First, we look at compatibility of the surrounding area to ensure that development will be compatible with the character of the area. The applicant has offered conditions as to uses. The RM16 district allows density up to 16 units per acre. The applicant has offered a condition to limit the density to 7 units per acre. Within that RM16 district, everything from single family to townhomes to duplex to multifamily is permitted. To ensure compatibility with the surrounding area, the applicants offered a condition to prohibit multifamily uses. There's also an issue as to environmental impacts on the site. There's a stream that runs along the western boundary of the property. This is a topographical map of the site. For those members of the public who are not familiar with reading such maps, where the lines are further apart, the land's fairly flat. Where the lines closer together, there's steeper terrains, and we've highlighted the stream. There are streams along the Skeet Club Road frontage of the site, and wherever there's streams, stream buffers are required. If it's an intermittent stream, it's a 50-foot buffer on both sides of the stream. If it's a perennial stream, it's a 100-foot buffer required on both sides. In this situation, there is a stream along the western boundary of the site, an intermittent stream. The applicants offered a condition that any development west of that stream would be single family. And to ensure that is being enforced, as part of the conditional zoning ordinance, they've offered what we call a conditional zoning plan. The intent's not to show how the property is to lay out, but just to address the condition. They've identified the streams on the site, the streams along Skeet Club Road with the stream buffers, so it identifies those buffers and their limited development potential in this area. The stream along the western boundary of the site is identified as stream A, and there's a specific condition within the ordinance noting that any development basically in this western portion of the site if that is developed, is limited to single-family homes only, and that will assist in ensuring compatibility with that abutting residential subdivision. The applicant has offered a condition based upon their neighborhood meeting to also provide a higher landscaping standards along the southern portion of the site next to their Orchard Knob development. I would note, as part of this abutting subdivision to the west, when that was platted and laid out as a cluster development, they included a 30-foot wide strip along their western boundary. That is land owned by the homeowners association of this abutting single-family development, and that 30-foot wide strip would provide some separation between that development and the zoning site if this is approved. Other items to look at is mitigating adverse impact. As for traffic impact, the applicant has noted in their conditional zoning ordinance that access to Johnson Street is limited to generally this location and this location. They've also offered conditions for road improvements, that there would be turn lanes and access limitations where you have a full access point in this general location, and this southern access point would be right in, right out only. Finally, we looked at, are there any issues to support this change in this area? Prior zoning approvals, specifically with the cluster developments to the north and west, and establishment of townhome developments to the south, those previous approvals have set policy supporting this land use in this area in close proximity to the intersection, and conditions offered by the applicant to restrict the type of use where multifamily is being prohibited, addresses policies of the land use plan as far as protecting watershed critical areas from inappropriate development and maintaining appropriate balance between the bulk of adjacent development. In conclusion, as far as this zoning request, staff is recommending approval of the annexation and recommending approval to establish a conditional zoning RM16 district on this property. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the zoning request at their July public hearing. The commission recommended approval by a vote of 7-0, and the commission is forwarding a statement to you that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because subject to approval of the plan amendment to establish a moderate density land use classification and based upon conditions offered by the applicant, the proposed conditional zoning RM16 district is supported by the goals and the policies of the land use plan and the Northwest Area Plan. Furthermore, the commission stated that the request is reasonable in the public interest because as conditioned to limit allowable residential uses and development density, the proposed conditional zoning RM16 district will support development that is similar to previously approved residential developments in this area. As staff has noted to council in the past, council must place into the official record a statement of consistency, and we do offer this statement that was forwarded to you from the Planning and Zoning Commission for your consideration. Are there any questions from Heidi or myself on the plan amendment, the annexation, or the zoning map amendment request?
Any questions? I have a couple quick ones, Councilman Moore. Just out of curiosity, when you, out of courtesy, talk to schools, I mean, we've had, I guess, the good fortune on the one hand of having substantial growth as of late. Do you get response back from them ever?
Yes, and that is included within your staff report. We put their information in verbatim, and I believe if you look on
I missed that.
page 4 or 7 of your staff report, school district comments, that is information that we received directly from them, and we include that in the public record as a part of the staff report. Okay. So that way, not only you have this, we also to the public that this is available for their consideration also to review.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I was looking up through all the staff report, and I don't see anywhere where there's a mention of a safety buffer for the horses.
Staff did not recommend, and the applicant at this point has not included any additional buffer along the street. Typically, when staff is evaluating a zoning request for residential, we typically don't recommend additional buffers along streets because the right-of-way provides some form of separation. I would note, and the Transportation Department is available to address this in further detail, the Johnson Street corridor from Ski Club Road north to I-40 is proposed in the next few years to be expanded from a 2-lane roadway to 4 lanes. And with that expansion, that may also There will be some right-of-way purchased from adjacent property owners that will assist in providing greater separation from the properties along that corridor.
Anything else? Did the applicant, familiar a little with the area, but did the applicant state what type of building or building materials they plan to use? Was that in their plan?
The staff did not address that question. The applicant may be able to help you on that.
Okay.
That is not something that the state legislators allows us to have as a condition for single-family detached or attached. There can be conditions on multifamily or commercial developments.
Okay. Well, I just know what's surrounding that area, and I hope it'll be compatible with that, which I think they would be. To ask anyone else here to speak concerning these items?
If I may be heard, please.
Sure. Just give us your name and.
If you just use that, your presentations are reloaded.
Thank you. Richard Coughlin from Greensboro here on behalf of the applicant. You will note from the PowerPoint that it says Mr. Terrell was going to be here, and I am not Mr. Terrell. He had an unforeseen development in another matter this afternoon, and so he asked me to step in. I will be short and sweet because I think everything I was going to say has been covered, and I don't want to be repetitive. The applicant and also Jamestown Engineering is here to the extent there's any questions that have to be addressed, or if I misstate anything, since I only know about 2 hours worth of what this development is. Again, this is somewhat repetitive what you saw. Skeet Club Road is an established residential corridor. This indicates where all the residential units are located within that area. If you look at the very top of the map, you can see one of the few open spaces is, in fact, the property that's at issue here. And so development of this residential development is entirely consistent. One of the questions, and again, the particular application here would limit density to 7 units per acre. As I understand, the current plan is less than that right now. There are wetlands and separations and the like, but that is also consistent with the application. One of the questions would be why townhomes? As I believe Mr. Shannon addressed, there's a market demand right now. Residents of Guilford County are looking for this type of housing, single family, as well as having townhomes. There's simply a demand. Why townhomes in this place? I think that question was answered in 2000, in which the Orchard Knob development was approved and rezoned for that. Also south of Skeet Club Road is another townhome development. So again, this is entirely consistent. Here is a picture of Orchard Knob that is right adjacent to and south of the area that will be developed. The intersection here of Johnson Street and Skeet Club Road, both are major thoroughfares that would absolutely support this development. In terms of the buffer, this shows below the green line is the Orchard Knob development. In there's been provision to have an appropriate buffer. And to the west as well, there is also a buffer that is there in the stream, and as indicated, the single-family housing would be to the left of the stream. I believe this is a photo to the east showing the wetlands to the southeast of the development, which shows where this would all remain undisturbed. Mr. Shannon discussed access to the property. It's been limited just to the east. In Skeet Club Road, there would be no access. Staff has recommended this, and there was unanimous support by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We request it be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Just get my mask.
Oh, okay. Thank you. At this time, if there's no further comment, I will close the public hearing on this item, and I will make a motion concerning Plan Amendment 21-02 and I will make a motion for approval of that item.
Second.
There's a motion and a second by Councilman Jones. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. The next item, I will make a motion that we approve annexation item 2103.
Second. Holmes?
Second by Councilman Holmes. We'll start there as well. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. This last item, within this group, 2021-368, will require two separate votes on the zoning map amendment. I will make a motion to approve the item 21-13.
Second.
There's a second by Councilwoman Peters. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson? Nope, I'm sorry. And those two, they flipped the line up on my cheat sheet. All right, sorry, that was not my mistake. I was on a roll. Oh, there you go. I got you. Okay, Councilman Williams is an aye. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That motion passes. Motion number 2 on item 2113. I move that council adopt the statement that zoning map amendment 2113 is consistent with the city's adopted policy guidance because subject to the approval of the plan amendment to establish a moderate density land use classification and based upon the conditions offered by the applicant, the proposed CZ RM16 district is supported by the goals and policies of the land use plan and the Northwest Area Plan. And furthermore, that the request is reasonable and in the public interest because as conditioned to limit allowable residential uses and development density, the proposed CZ RM16 district will support the development similar to previously approved residential developments in that area. I make that motion for approval.
Second.
There's a second by Councilman Hudson. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Next on the item, on our item of public hearing, I will open the public hearing for item 2021-369, Amarok LLC. Presenting tonight is Chris Andrews.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Pro Tem Council members. Chris Andrews with the Planning Department. This item is a request by Amarok LLC to revise portions of the development ordinance within Section 5, the fence section, regarding fence height, material, and to allow low-voltage electric fences, which would be subject to certain standards. As kind of a disclaimer, this is a topic that the applicant is going to be able to explain much more about in terms of the technical features of the fence. But for some perspective, a low voltage electric fence is a supplemental safety feature that is placed within the boundaries of an existing wall or fence. And it's not connected to any sort of hardwired system. It's run on battery and solar power. And this photo shows, you can kind of see where the chain link fence is. And then on the inside to the right, you see that the pole with those horizontal wires. That is the system that we're talking about tonight. The applicant desires to construct a low-voltage electric fence for an operator of a vehicle delivery company which operates on 2 properties within the light industrial zoning district in the southern portion of the city. The vehicle delivery company has experienced damage to vehicles because of catalytic converter theft and is exploring their options to better secure their storage areas. Currently, the development ordinance only permits fences that carry any sort of electrical charge or current to be used for the purposes of enclosing livestock. The applicant has requested that that a low-voltage electric fence be permitted within only the light industrial and heavy industrial districts within the city, and subject to a set of standards, and I'll read those standards here now. As part of the amendment, the applicant has provided that the standards would, 1, require that low-voltage electric fences be enclosed by a non-electric fence or wall of at least 6 feet in height. Number 2, that the height of a low-voltage electric fence be no greater than 10 feet or 2 feet taller than any fence by which it's enclosed. And the reason for that extra 2 feet is we do allow fences to be greater than 10 feet in certain circumstances, and the functionality of this system requires that it's just a bit higher than a solid fence so that you can't jump over it. Third standard, that a low-voltage electric fence be separated from any non-electric fence or wall by a minimum of 6 inches, except when enclosed by a gate. You don't want, as explained by the applicant, you don't want a large distance in between these two systems so that you can be kind of trapped in the middle. That closer distance is required for operation. And then 4, that a low-voltage electric fence be identified by signs, each not to exceed 4 square feet. The light industrial and heavy industrial zoning districts within the city were established to accommodate manufacturing, assembly, fabrication, processing, distribution, storage, research and development, and many other industrial uses that typically include some sort of exterior movements of vehicles or storage of materials. And certain uses may require temporary staging of goods, whether waiting for transport, and some of those carry a higher value. Fencing for non-residential uses already in the development ordinance is permitted to use barbed wire, razor wire, or concertina wire, subject to some height standards. However, the recent activity at the applicant site has proven that these fence measures are needed. They can account to more of what's happened at their site. The proposed amendment would provide some increased flexibility of allowable fence materials within the light industrial and heavy industrial district, again, subject to standards. These standards assist in maintaining the purpose of regulating the location, height, and appearance of fences, while also providing public safety, security, and privacy of land within those districts. I will note, for perspective, Guilford County added a similar provision to their development ordinance in 2014, where I believe Amarok, or their parent company, was the applicant, and almost identical standards are in place for Guilford County. There are some other municipalities that staff looked at through the state of North Carolina as well. Staff recommends approval of the requested amendment. This item was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their July 27th meeting, and was recommended by a vote of 6-1 for approval. The statements of consistency and reasonableness were adopted by the commission and are available for consideration within the staff report. And again, staff recommends approval of this item, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Councilman Williams, any liability will lie with the owner of the property and the fence, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's my only question.
And it would require a fence permit as well, any typical permitting. But I believe that the applicant and the representative from the transport company are here as well.
I am, if there's nothing else for staff, I'm showing that Mr. Phil Folk, is that pronounced correctly? Yes, sir. I hope so, is here on behalf of Amarok.
And Cindy Williams.
And Cindy Williams.
I didn't sign her in when I got in.
Okay.
But I'm also representing Hoosier Transit as well.
Good evening, council. My name is Cindy Williams. I'm here representing Amarok. My address is 550 Assembly Street, Columbia, South Carolina. Chris did a great job explaining what we're here trying to do. The technology has been around, these fences have been around since the early 1990s, but it's a very niche application. So it's very commonplace and very usual for me to approach a city when we have a customer that approaches us in a new city that we've never been in before, for their codes to not accommodate the system. Because they've never, typically, when you write codes, the only application you think of for an electric fence is in an agricultural setting, not in a perimeter security setting. This is truly just a security fence. So we just ask that you consider updating your codes to some newer technology that's out there. And it's not that you're behind the times, but nobody knows about it until we approach you and you know about it then. We do have over 400 fences in the state of North Carolina. We have like about 125 in Charlotte, and then we're spread out throughout the state of North Carolina. We have about 5,000 fences nationwide. So we are the leader in the industry for this. It's a very effective, very safe security solution for the right businesses, and those are businesses with outdoor storage typically. Think of trucking terminals, think of trucks outside, think of landscaping businesses, metal recycler businesses, large equipment rental businesses like United Rentals and stuff. Businesses that just simply can't bring them in a warehouse under lock and key. And so this is their alarm system, because it is alarm. It's monitored alarm. If somebody breaches the fence, it sets off an alarm. A phone call is made, just like you would see an ADT phone call commercial. They would call Phil or his designee. He would verify the alarm and look online, and he can, there's tools that he has at his availability to verify the alarm and then determine whether to call the police. But what we really find is when these businesses install this system, their crime problem goes away. So we just ask that you consider this, and I'm going to let Phil give you a more real lifetime situation here of what's going on in High Point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, council. Thank you for your time. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Chris and staff for the efforts that they've put forth in this. I think when I first contacted Mayor Wagner and Chris, they thought I was a little bit crazy, but they've been very supportive and helpful through this process. Several months ago, I got hit for catalytic converters on my Thomas-built buses. I'm one of the drive-away companies that delivers Thomas buses and Mickey trucks. The cost per catalytic converter is $2,700. Fixing the fence is $600. I came across this system. We've implemented this system in Goshen, Indiana, and Imlay City, Michigan, with no problems at our existing lots up there. When I came across this system, the one thing that I liked were the aesthetics. Razor wire looks like a prison. Barbed wire looks like a prison. This, when you look at this picture, it blends very nicely with the chain link. The wires are very small. So when somebody's driving down the road, they're not getting intimidated by that neighborhood. It's very visible. A lot of my competitors have noticed it. A lot of my drivers appreciate it. When we implemented it in Indiana, we've had no safety issues. Anybody who has access to the lot has a PIN number that can arm and disarm the system. We also have apps where we can arm and disarm the system, and then we can also verify via our cameras with our notifications. The chances of somebody innocent being hurt are very slim. There is a distance between the two fences. Again, when the gate's open and it's disarmed, the fence is completely harmless. If somebody decides to close the fence and arm themselves within it, they're within the protection of that fence. Law enforcement's trying, but law enforcement can't catch these catalytic converter thieves. They're hitting churches, they're hitting schools, and it's just a matter of time before it gets even worse. It's also getting more dangerous. In Jackson, Mississippi, somebody came out, somebody was stealing his catalytic converter, they got in an altercation, and the thief was actually shot and killed, which is not something I want. I explored armed security guards, I explored just regular security guards, I explored cameras, but cameras are forensic. They're not going to stop anybody. Great, I can give it to the police, but the police have hundreds of suspects, and the police have other priorities. The other thing, too, with guards, especially if you have an armed guard, which is allowed, if there is a break-in, law enforcement's coming into a situation with just yet another gun. In this particular situation, if that alarm goes off and I dispatch police, they know somebody's there, and because of the way the fence detects the intrusion, they know where that person entered and where that person may be, which is a lot safer for law enforcement. Again, razor wire, when you talk about danger and safety, razor wire has to be surgical steel because if somebody does get in, they have to be able to be sewn up. It appears terrible, and it's a lot more dangerous than the low voltage system. This is all tied to solar, all battery powered with an energizer, but it's also an alarm system at the same time it's an electric fence. So it's a dual purpose. Are there any questions?
Any questions or comments? I got a question, and this sounds just like a question I'd asked. Did you come from Indiana to talk to us?
No, sir, I live in Thomasville.
Okay.
I came from Myrtle Beach.
Well, thank you. We had some storms to come through, I imagine. Okay, is there any other comments or questions? Okay, well, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing on this matter. This matter does require 2 votes for its completion. So I will make a motion for the approval of text amendment 2103.
Second, Johnson.
There's a second by Councilman Johnson. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. And I will make the second motion, and I move that council adopt the statement that text amendment 2103 is neither consistent nor inconsistent with the city's adopted policy guidance, and furthermore, that the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the proposed amendment provides increased flexibility and allowable fence materials within the LI and HI districts, subject to standards that maintain the purpose of regulating the location, height, and appearance of fences while providing public safety, security, and privacy of land. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Williams. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. The next item is 2021-370. And again, this item will require several motions and votes similar to the one we went through earlier. Andy Piper will be first to present and explain the format before us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and council members.
Hold on. I need to open the public hearing on item 2021-370. And if she would have wrote that bigger, I could have seen it.
Do the other one. You are welcome to go ahead and open the public hearing for 370, 371, and 372. I believe these are 3 related items that you'll be hearing.
Okay, then I'll amend the opening to include items 2021-370, 371, and 372.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Andy Piper, planner with the Planning and Development Department. This, as you explained, and as we did earlier, is going to be a joint presentation of Land Use Plan Amendment Case 2103, Annexation Case 2104, and Zoning Map Amendment Case 2114. I'll give an overview of the Land Use Plan Amendment, and then Herb will follow with a presentation of the annexation and rezoning requests. However, you will have to vote on the items separately. Just to orient everyone on the map, the requested amendment to the land use plan is approximately 9 acres on the north side of West Windover Avenue, about 700 feet east of Piedmont Parkway, between Windover and Hickory Grove Road. The adjacent properties have a variety of land uses, including a quarry to the north, single-family homes, and a medical facility to the east, undeveloped parcels, and a shopping center to the south, and a religious institution to the west. This is also reflected, as you can see in the land use plan map here, that the classifications for the surrounding area are also have a lot of variety, and pretty much run the gamut of residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional uses. The applicant is requesting a change in classification from low-density residential, office, and a small area of institutional to high-density residential, which allows densities of 16 to 26 dwelling units per acre to accommodate a proposed 240-unit multifamily development. Because the site is on a major thoroughfare that connects High Point to Greensboro and is in close proximity to interchanges with Guilford College Road and I-73, staff noted that it has the potential to be an attractive location for higher density residential development that caters to commuters. The extension of water service to the new Guilford County Animal Shelter on Guilford College Road. It may also lead to more interest in development of this area in the future. Staff recommends approval of the request because it meets the goals and objectives of the land use plan, the West Windover Avenue Guilford College Road corridor plan, and will be in harmony with the land use pattern of the surrounding area. And the Planning and Zoning Commission agreed, voting 7-0 in favor of the request at their July meeting. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the land use plan amendment before I turn it over to Herb to talk about the annexation and rezoning request.
Any questions for Mr. Piper? Okay, thank you.
Once again, Herb Shannon with the Planning and Development Department, and I'll be providing you with a summary of the other two applications associated with the site, which is Annexation Case 2104 and Zoning Map Amendment 2114. As far as the annexation request, the applicants requesting annexation have access to city utilities in order to develop a multifamily project. As you can see, the site does abut the city's corporate limits to the east and to the south. The city's planning area does extend to Guilford College Road. As this site is surrounded to the east, west, and south by lands that have already been annexed to the city, those areas highlighted in white on the map, this is a reasonable extension of the city's annexation policy in this area, and annexation of this property would not negatively affect the city's ability to provide services in this area. As for the zoning proposal, the site is currently under Guilford County's zoning jurisdiction. They've requested rezoning to a conditional zoning RM16 district. Included with that application is a conditional zoning ordinance in which the applicant has offered conditions pertaining to landscaping, right-of-way dedication, and vehicle access. As additional backup information included in your staff report is summary of information from the Guilford County Schools as to school impacts. And this request did trigger a traffic impact analysis that was evaluated by the city's transportation department, and including your staff reports, that transportation table and an executive summary of that TIA is included as backup information in the staff report. The applicant desires to construct a multifamily development, as Andy has noted, at a density up to 26 units per acre. Current land use policy supports office uses fronting along this portion of West Windover Avenue. If rezoned for an office use, all of our office districts support multifamily uses. Thus, this is not introducing a new use into this area. However, the density of development would require policy updates. That's why we have the plan amendment to update the maximum density of this area, as our office districts allows multifamily up to 16 units per acre. Key items to point from the staff report are, as far as compatibility with the surrounding area, the request is in accordance with the objectives of the West Windover Avenue Guilford College Corridor Plan, which seeks to promote higher densities along this corridor, specifically along the north side of the corridor outside of watershed critical area, and this site does meet this criteria. The applicant has offered higher landscaping standards along the West Windover Avenue frontage, mainly due to concerns staff had due to the topography. There are going to be some retaining walls of some height, and the corridor plan speaks to having higher screening standards to help filter reviews of views along this corridor. The applicant has also noted as part of the development there may be some accessory garages. That higher landscaping standard will help filter review of the back side of those garages, so you don't just see blank walls. Far as impacts on adjacent property, the ordinance already has standards for perimeter landscaping requirements, exterior lighting, and open space requirements for multifamily. And the applicant has offered a condition to restrict the site to one point of access to West Wendover Avenue, which is a key policy of the corridor plan. That plan speaks to either prohibiting or limiting the number of access points to that corridor, and they've offered that condition. Finally, when we look at the impact on adjacent properties and is this change supported by the development pattern, as Andy has outlined, you have a medical facility, office zoning to the east, this shopping center and its accompanying townhome development, they all came together to the south, a church to the west, and a quarry to the north. Thus, the allowance of higher density residential uses in this area would not negatively impact adjacent lands. And the development pattern in this area is a mixture of multifamily, townhomes, and commercial use. Thus, the request would be compatible with that mixture of uses. Thus, staff is recommending approval of this rezoning request to establish a conditional zoning RM26 district on this site. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this request at the July public hearing and recommended approval by a vote of 7-0. And they forward to you this following statement, that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because the West Wendover Avenue Guilford College Road corridor plan promotes the establishment of higher density residential development along this corridor, and subject to the approval of the plan amendment, higher density residential development up to 26 units per acre would be supported by adopted policy. Furthermore, the commission stated that the request is reasonable in the public interest because land surrounding the intersection of West Wendover Avenue and Piedmont Parkway has developed with a mixture of commercial, institutional, and residential uses, and based upon the need for housing, it is suitable to allow higher intensity residential uses near this intersection. That is a summary of the annexation and zoning. If there are any questions of Andy and myself, I'll be glad to address your questions.
Any questions for staff on this item? Thank you, Herb. I'm showing that a Mr., if I pronounce it right, Kerry Laveau might be here to speak concerning the applicant, so welcome. And just like Mr. Folk before, he didn't give your name, so please
Certainly.
give us your name and...
Yes, certainly. My name is Amanda Hodiern. My offices are at 804 Green Valley Road in Greensboro, 27408. And I'm here tonight on behalf of Crown Partners. Mr. Kerry Laveau is here also, so I'm going to let him speak in a minute to the company and to what they do with their communities, but I wanted to talk about the request briefly. Once again, Mr. Piper and Mr. Shannon have given a very thorough and informative report, so I'm going to be brief and just emphasize and highlight a few things. Crown Partners is a family-owned business. They build multifamily communities across the Southeast and beyond, including in this part of the world. James Landing, just across Wendover from this property, is a Crown Partners community. So they're excited to have the opportunity to put down more roots here in High Point now and be a further part of the community. I wanted to show you a couple specifics about the property. Of course, this is an application to allow for a multifamily housing development along this interchange and major thoroughfare here in High Point, and it's really that location that's driving this request. With it being a major thoroughfare, as you've heard from your staff, and the two major interchanges with the I-73 corridor and the Guilford College Road corridor, this location is just a fantastic one for folks who want to get to all points within High Point and Greensboro and Jamestown and beyond, and still also live in a city with everything they need around them to enjoy a good existence and home life. So this is an illustrative rendering of the multifamily project that could be built here, intended to be built here by my client. As you can see, a high quality, very modern and aesthetically pleasing community. This is an illustrative site plan laid out on the site. This has been reviewed by your staff and no red flags raised. Of course, this would have to go through your thorough TRC process for actual site plan approval, but we did want to go ahead and put pen to paper and see how this could lay out. You see, in addition to the units broken up in 4 separate buildings, you see lots of separated parking areas, lots of buffering. There's a dog park, There is a community center with interior amenities that we'll talk about in a minute. There's a pool area, and there's several detached garage building structures to support the housing. This is just showing you where Crown Partners has communities across the United States. This is showing you an example of one of their clubhouse and pool features. Inside the clubhouse, you have things like co-working space, a media lounge with coffee bar, an interactive health and wellness center, usually a fire pit and grilling area with a courtyard out around the heated saltwater pool. All of their buildings do have interior elevator access as well. This is showing you some of those interiors for the common spaces, just letting you see the level of detail and how far they go to really try and make these spaces feel like home and very usable for their residents. This is looking at some of the interior features and the finishes that are used. Again, just a very high-level product that people have been extremely popular and people enjoy calling home, with the stonework countertops, the stainless steel appliances, the flooring, etc. Just a few more looks at that. You see the walk-in shower and the walk-in closet. And these are just some examples of other developments in the area or in the southeast. This is in Johns Island, South Carolina. Same one. This is in Alabama. This is in Cary, just down the road. That's an interior common space in Cary. This is an example of one of the fitness facilities that they've built in their Colorado community. This is Bluffington, South Carolina. And these are just some various exterior shots. And again, back to the proposal for High Point. Just looking at a couple of specifics and technical aspects of the request, our development team did meet with planning staff early and often through the process, and we've crafted our request with their feedback, making sure the conditions matched what needed to be done to accommodate the comprehensive plan and the traffic study that was done. As you've heard from Mr. Shannon, our conditions do offer and commit to all of the required improvements that the traffic study indicated, so those will certainly come. The neighborhood outreach that we've conducted, I think was certainly very useful. We did hold a Zoom community meeting that we sent out letters to all of our neighbors. No one attended that meeting. We held it open for about 25 minutes and no one attended. But then we followed up and met with some of our adjoining neighbors at the church next door and had a nice productive meeting just about making sure to co-manage logistics. So if the church is having a funeral one day, we make sure we're not having a resident pool party at the same time and things like that, just to keep the communication channels open so we can be good neighbors. In summary, with this location being so ideal for a higher density like this, and with other opportunities in High Point being limited with your airport overlay district precluding projects like this in certain areas, I hope you'll agree that this is a appropriate and reasonable location to put a project like this. It's a high caliber community that I think will be an amenity to current residents and future residents and to the city as a whole. See, I think I've covered about everything that I wanted to emphasize, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I do want to turn it over to Kerry for a minute just to say hello from his standpoint. Thank you.
Any questions at this point?
What's the price point on these types of apartments?
I'll let Mr. Laveau answer that if that's okay. Thanks.
Good night. I know we're all hungry, so I'll try and keep it brief. I just wanted to put a face to the company. I'm of the second generation of Crown Partners. We are a family-owned and operated company. Been around since 1984, and we entered the community in 1999 with James Landing. And I personally actually selected this site. Given the growth of High Point and the community and the overwhelming success of James Landing, and much to the chagrin of our investors, we opted not to sell because we enjoy it so much and the community is thriving as much as it is. We're Class A developers. We hold for a very long time and put a lot of capital, time, and resources into our communities, which involved variations of renovations over the years to make the product, appeal to a newer time in the future. And with this community, we anticipate it being a Class A community with all the bells and whistles, and we couldn't be happier with the selection of the site and the location of the site, specifically for middle class and people who need a nice place to live in the community.
Thank you. Any questions? Victor, you want to?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious as to, you know, what the price point on apartments like this would be.
So that's a bit of a moving target, but I can say that the average rent per unit is probably going to get somewhere in the $1,400 to $1,500 per unit range. I know our community down the street is, for the renovated units, in the $1,100 to high $1,100 for a one-bedroom, high $1,400 to low $1,500 for a two-bedroom, and then north of $1,600 for a three-bedroom. We anticipate this community being much newer, looking much better, so usually we try and go for about $150 to $200 more, just given that we're going to take a step up in quality. So that is a rough estimate. I don't want to be wedded to that, but.
Any other comments or
I
questions?
only got more, it's like two-part question. You say it's 4 floors. Is an elevator in this?
4 stories, elevator products. Every building will be elevated. And we are debating whether or not we should enclose the corridors and condition them, which would be as nice of a product as you can build, but that's to be determined.
All right. Will it be big enough to accommodate like people moving furniture in when they move in?
We always have a freight elevator in every building for various move-in and move-outs. We usually always have a pretty steady dose of 3-bedroom units for families. Our competitors don't like 3 bedrooms, we like 3 bedrooms, so there will be at least 10% 3 bedrooms if we can fit them on the site.
All right, well, thank you. I had deep concerns when they tend to ask us Generation X folks to help move family in. Move floors or move furniture. Thank you.
Understood, sure.
Any other questions or comments? I appreciate you sticking
you.
around for the presentation, and I'm sorry it was down the line for you. At this time, if there's no other comments, I will close the public hearing on items 2021-370, 371, 372. And I will proceed to make a motion for the approval of Plan Amendment 2103 under item 2021-370.
Second, Holmes.
There is a second by Councilman Holmes. So I'll come right back to you to keep in order. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. Next, I will make a motion for approval of annexation item 21-04 under 2020-1-371. Is there a second?
Second, Johnson.
There's a second by Councilman Johnson. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
All right.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. The next item is the 2021-372, and on motion number 1, I move for approval of zoning map amendment 21-14.
Second.
Second by Councilman Hudson. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman, they flipped on me again, Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
And I will make motion number 2, and I move that council adopt the statement that the zoning map amendment 21-14 is consistent with the city's adopted policy guidance because the West Wendover Avenue Guilford College Road corridor plan promotes the establishment of higher density residential development along this corridor, and subject to approval of the planned amendment, higher density residential development up to 26 dwelling units per acre would be supported by adopted policy. And furthermore, that the request is reasonable and in public interest because land surrounding the intersection of West Wendover Avenue and Piedmont Parkway have developed with a mixture of commercial, institutional, and residential uses, and based upon the need for housing, it is suitable to allow higher density residential uses near this intersection. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Peters. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
And Councilman Jones.
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you very much. And that is all, I believe. Get refired up here of our public hearings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Under our general business agenda tonight, we have an item 2021-376. And on this item, I believe it's about the regulation, it's an ordinance regulation of electrical personal assistive mobility devices. And I'm going to recognize, I believe, Joanne Carlisle at this point.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Moore, I appreciate it. I'm bringing tonight.
Excuse me, if you don't mind for your presentation.
I'm bringing tonight for your consideration an ordinance that would allow electric personal assistive mobility devices. We're going to call them mobility devices, but you can also call them stand-up scooters. I didn't invent that lengthy electric personal title. That is clearly from the general statutes, and I'm sure that some attorneys spent a lot of time coming up with that language, and it's a very descriptive, lots of words in that description anyway. We've been approached by the Market Authority because they would like to offer their visitors during market periods of time the option of being able to use a stand-up scooter. The stand-up scooters would only be allowed in a certain area, which is considered the market area. They would only be allowed during the market times, and those times would be determined by the Market Authority. Those are the times that they generally announce when the market is coming, and then we would allow them to be maybe 7 days before, but all of that would be established by the Market Authority. The Market Authority would be responsible for going out and obtaining whomever the company is that they want to do business with and bringing the scooters into the city limits for the use. All of the regulations that they would have to abide by or what we would have to do if we were doing this as a city. So they in turn are really going to have a lot of responsibility. It's kind of a pilot program. However, since it is an ordinance, we don't label it as that. It's something that you have to go ahead and vote on now. If it doesn't work out, it's kind of, again, like a pilot program. We'll see. We're hoping it'll be successful. If not, then we'll come back and either amend so that it is successful, or you can consider, rescinding it at that point in time. Mayor Pro Tem Moore, the floor is not open right now for the public to speak, but we do have some representatives from the Market Authority if you'd like to recognize them.
Certainly, since they've taken the time to be here this long. Is there formal language I need to do that?
No, that is all you need to do, and of course, I'm here if you have any questions. And
Okay. Well, since you are here, Tammy and other, if you would like to speak, please come forward and give us your name and address and present.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Moore, and thank you to council for letting us just say a few words. Tammy Nagum, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the High Point Market Authority, 1650 North Clodfelter Road in High Point. As the city attorney so eloquently read that very long title of who these folks are, it is basically electric scooters, which you see in a lot of cities. And this is something we've had requests from market guests. As you all know, our greatest strength and our greatest weakness for this market is we're 13 blocks wide. And so while we do provide a pretty extensive transportation system, on beautiful days, there's nothing better than moving about the streets. And this would give an additional guest service for our market goers. This is a pilot. We don't really know how this is going to go. We've talked to several vendors, brought them in last market. Terry Venable on our staff has worked extensively with these folks. They're all chomping at the bit to get to High Point. And so this gives us an opportunity to see how this would go. We're going to start with 50. If you all approve, we're going to see how that goes this market. But this will be something, as the city attorney mentioned, we've worked with the city transportation department to really outline where these scooters could go. They'll be paid for by the market guests. They'll scan their credit card on a QR code. And when they get close to the boundaries, they will begin to beep and get slower. And then so they will be notified that they're coming to the kind of edge of that. And the vendor will also be on site to collect those scooters. Chris, make sure they're not sitting in your dock or in front of your doors. All those things that we know that'll happen, they'll just get right off of them and walk right in. So the vendor will make sure that these are distributed each night, that they're charged. We'll give location and work with the city to make sure that's taken care of. But this is just an extension of our guest service for folks coming to High Point, and we'll see how it goes.
Any comments or questions for Tammy?
Just to thank you for for pointing that fact out. We don't want them.
I was going to say, just call me, Chris. You know where they'll be.
I'll be more concerned if my team's taking off on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Tammy, have you?
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
Have you had a discussion with traffic division of our police as to what to anticipate with this being the first time, that kind of thing? Just a conversation?
We have. We've talked to our police department, as well as I've reached out to the folks in Greensboro who have also implemented this in their downtown, and we've all had conversation about the things that we should consider and look out for. So absolutely, Councilman, we know that this comes with some issues and some things that we need to be aware of, and so we're going to work closely with those folks to make sure we're doing this safely.
Well, it's something new, and
It is.
It's you know, an amenity to something that's very
Yeah.
important to our town and state and country. So I think it's.
Are these street only, not sidewalk?
They can be either, and that's something that we are going to work closely with the vendor as well as with the city on the best way to handle that. There are concerns for both, of course, but making sure that also our guests are educated about, you know, where they should ride. But you're exactly right, Councilman Hudson, that being one place or the other is
If they're wearing earbuds, does the beeper go off?
Yeah, I should also mention we're looking at like 12 miles an hour max. We kind of did the test last market to see how fast you have to be to get up the steepest hill in downtown. And depending on your weight, that's about 12 miles an hour. So we don't want them to go too fast, but at the same time, that people can move around. And, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
If I could just mention one other thing too, because it's the first time that you guys are hearing this ordinance tonight, it does require a 2/3 majority vote for approval, and that would be 6 of you.
Okay, if there's no other comments, then I will make a motion for.
I want to ask a question, just so I understand this. I was asking Wesley, but, so currently you cannot ride one of these scooters in the city limits of High Point legally? Is that what I understand?
We do not have any ordinance that allows them in the city of High Point.
So what happens if somebody rides a scooter in High Point? I mean, they get a ticket? Really? Huh, okay.
You trying to tell us something?
No, I mean, I know old Mayor's got the little electric little bike.
Okay, Victor. Might want to scratch
You
that
gonna
one
buy,
from the record.
he's gonna have a fleet of scooters
This is a
now.
bike.
And that is why we have an ordinance for the regulation. We're trying to
Yeah.
maintain an area and a time that they are allowed. And not
Okay.
outside of that area or that time established by the market authority.
Now? Okay, I will make a motion to approve item 2021-376.
Second.
There's a motion and a second by Councilman Williams. And I will call the vote. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Next under general business is item 2021-373, and this is an appointment of Giselle Mancy, if I pronounced it correct, to our Human Relations Commission. This is an appointment of Councilman Williams, Ward 2. Would you like to speak to this matter, Mr. Williams?
Sure. I met Giselle at our Community Development Committee, and because of her work with the YWCA and the vaccination efforts within some of the lower ward, I would like to make it in a motion to add her to the Human Relations Commission as a motion.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second. Johnson.
There's a bunch of seconds. We'll go with Councilwoman Peters. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
That passes. The final item is 2021-374, approval of minutes. Is there any corrections or revisions to the minutes as submitted?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilman Hudson, a second by Councilman Williams. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore is an aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Is there anything else to come before council? I would like to say thank you to the staff, to all that waited, to my fellow council folks, and everyone that helped me navigate along this night. And it was quite a big agenda, so I appreciate all the help.
Motion to approve. Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes. We're adjourned.